Welcome to the Point. In what has been an active first quarter in Lansing, the legislature is now taking a 2-week break. For some, it may be a welcome pause from a hectic schedule that saw a lot of Democratic objectives accomplished. For one legislator who knows all too well about serving in the minority, the switch to a Democratic majority has been a positive change. Grand Rapids Representative Rachel Hood talked to me about the session so far. Representative, thank you for being here at kind of the end of the first frantic pace of this legislative session. That's where I want to start. You're a seasoned legislator. You've been in the minority. You're now in the majority. You've seen how things have worked. And my estimation is this is one of the most remarkable 60 or 90 days, however many days that I've seen in the legislature. What's it been like from a legislator standpoint?
Well, it has been a learning opportunity. We certainly have been moving fast and set a historic pace. We've done more bills in the first 90 days of this legislature than we had done in the previous months of the last 6 legislatures. Pretty complicated stuff there, but
yeah.
Nonetheless, really impactful for the people of Michigan. We addressed fundamental human rights. We've been advancing common sense gun reforms. We are advancing economic solutions, and of course, making sure that workers are first.
When you look at some of those things, and we don't have to go through each one of them, but let's talk about, and I believe it depends on who you're talking to. It's either right to work or freedom to choose, but anyway, it's about the repeal of what Republicans passed back in 2012, 2011, something like that, that said, nope, you don't have to join a union if you're going to work at a union shop. This bill says, yes, you're going to join a union if you go to work at a union shop. Without getting into the relative merits, it's one of those issues that was a singular party vote. It was Democrats only voting in favor of that, with Republicans voting against it. There were other bills, like some of the gun bills as well. Does that create a problem going forward, or are these just the items that you had talked about for a very long time as a party, doing all of the things that you talked about doing? Was this just a matter of doing these now, holding yourself to those promises that you made without regard to what I assume is going to have to be a more collaborative plan when it comes to things like budgets and further legislation? Because, and I should explain why I say that, because you can't always keep 56 together. It's not always going to be able to keep all of your colleagues together.
Yeah, certainly the goal is to keep all of our colleagues together and to be able to move forward with the legislation that the people of Michigan elected us to accomplish. It was a clear referendum and a clear majority, a slim majority, but clear and decisive. And that means that we have to, push those commitments forward. We have advanced rights for LGBTQ people that we've been working on for 50 years. We have been advancing rights in protecting women's rights and protecting our right to choose, protecting our ability to access basic health care that people need to grow healthy families. We made sure that we responded to multiple crises that have sadly hit home. Tragedies across the nation and here in Michigan have mobilized citizens, and people have been calling us to move forward with common sense gun reform. It was an imperative, and we are well on our way to addressing our key priorities there. And then finally, workers' rights. We know that when workers have expanded rights in states, that this makes economic sense, that workers will make more than $9,000 more annually, and that is a significant, and that's a significant investment in the people of Michigan, critical for our workers. This is data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
What do you say to the economic development folks, some of whom testified, and said, being, and again, terminology, but in their terms, a right-to-work state, was one extra advantage they had in attracting businesses. Is that a legitimate argument from your standpoint?
It hasn't really proven out, Rick, and what we're doing right now and investing in the next generation of technology in our state to drive our mobility industry forward, to make sure that we're competitive and bringing technologies back to Michigan. That work is, those are jobs that are and employers that are committed to supporting unions and committed to partnering with them. They know that unions provide meaningful benefits to the people of Michigan. Unions invest an enormous amount of resources and training a workforce that can deliver. And that's proven out on our infrastructure projects, where time and again union projects have proven to be more effective in delivering on time and under budget. And that is what we all need, right? Skilled workers who are valued for their work, who have the resources and benefits they need to have successful lives, be able to focus when they're on the job and do the job right.
We could spend the rest of our time together talking about what's transpired over these last 90 days, and we've done show after show after show highlighting some of those things. I would say it's one of the biggest lifts that I've seen a legislature attempt in my time of covering over there. But we're only just started. I mean, there's a lot more going on. And when you and I sat down, I said, hey, what else are you working on? And you started writing down this laundry list of things that you're working. So tell me what we're going to expect after the legislature gets back, and maybe things move at a somewhat less frantic pace. We'll see, but there is a lot to do.
Well, there is an enormous amount to do. We have to fix auto no-fault laws. I've heard from constituents across my district in the 81st that this is a priority for them. They want to make sure people are taken care of, especially our most vulnerable families who have, a paraplegic or quadriplegic family member who needs constant care. We want to make sure they're supported.
And one of the things, if I may interrupt there, one of the things that happened early on in the governor's first term was something that I know I had said many times I didn't think would ever happen, and it was auto no-fault reform. But part of that reform resulted in a pay schedule that doesn't allow for in-home care for some folks. And we have seen advocates over at the Capitol time and time again. In fact, during our governor's debate for the general election, we had one of our viewers who actually recorded and sent out a question about that very issue of reforming auto no-fault. The issue's been out there for a while. Is that something you can get done? Is that something that you'll be able to find enough votes, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, that you think you can get something to the governor?
Yeah, I know that we'll be able to work on meaningful rates for rehab support, for family support, expand available family care with bipartisan votes. We have, upwards of 20 different bills that are part of the fix for what was a really sloppy bill, SB 1 of 2019. We have a lot of work to do there. We may not get 100% of the way, but we're going to have smart conversations, and we're going to find ways to deliver win-wins for the people of Michigan. Also working on restoring teacher bargaining rights. So there are a lot more details that will go into around restoring workers' rights. We have that package expands negotiations to teacher parapros, who are such an important part of our school cultures and supporting our students, especially our most vulnerable students. We have immediate issues to deal with around energy reliability, and a package that will be ready to drop soon. The Drive Safe package is a critical issue regarding the dignity of many of our workers here in West Michigan and across the state. We need to be a more welcoming state and deliver legal licenses for all persons who come into the state who are ready and willing to work and be part of our communities. We need to make sure they have the dignity to deliver their kids to school safely and be part of our driving culture and our economy. We have work to do to advance climate solutions. The My Healthy Climate Plan has been submitted, and we are all working to deliver bills that touch on various aspects of that plan. That includes clean energy, energy efficiency, stormwater and water protection. I could go on climate bills.
And I suspect we will, because that package alone probably deserves a full sit down so we can discuss the items in there, because that will have impact on everybody in the state in one form or another if implemented.
Yes.
But in the less than minute that we have left, I just want to get your take, going from minority to majority. As you point out, it's still a pretty slim majority, but majority nonetheless.
Yeah.
And then going through this first part of this session, how has this impacted you? Because there were some crazy hours, there were some crazy votes that came up crazy fast. And now that you've got a moment to step back a little bit and look at it, what has it been like?
It's been an enormous opportunity, and one that I fought hard to win. One that represents what I think is a better future for Michigan. And I'm thrilled to be working harder than ever before, having even crazier nights. Although certainly we don't want to be pressing legislation in the wee hours. We want transparency, but we're going to work hard, we're going to work steady, and we're going to make sure that we get Michigan back on track. And I'm thrilled to be a part of it, honored. I appreciate all the voters who supported me.
If Democrats are pleased by the progress they believe that they've made in the opening weeks of this legislative session, Republicans are far from it. And coming up, one member who, like Representative Hood, has made the transition after the election, only in his case, from majority to minority. Talks about that experience next. To the Point. Welcome back to The Point. The new Democratic majority in the State House and Senate have spent weeks hurriedly putting in place priorities they talked about during the campaign and doing away with Republican agenda items like right to work. It's been a major change, not just in the kind of policies that are being pursued, but the way those policies are being pursued. Kent County Republican Brian Posthumus talks about how his party is navigating that change. Representative, welcome to the show. You have been on before, but never quite in these circumstances. You are now in the minority. You're in leadership in the minority. In fact, you stand right in the center of the chamber, right next to the majority floor leader.
Right.
Two of you talk quite frequently. But it's much different for you and all Republicans this session. And these first 90 days have been fascinating for me to watch. I've never seen anything quite like it. What's your take from being in the majority, now in the minority, being in leadership, on the floor every day? It's been very active.
It has been active. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And you're right, it has been interesting. It's substantially different from being in the majority for the previous 2 years and now being in a leadership position in the minority now. You know, and when we were in the majority, there was number one, a substantially higher reverence to rules and decorum and understanding that the institution is bigger than we are. But also, we were able to get our agenda through the legislature. We were able to work a little bit more bipartisan on issues affecting everyday Michiganders. But now, kind of the dynamic that we're in now is you see a lot of votes going up on the board that are 56 Democrats and 54 Republicans against it. And so it's really been a lesson in that unilateral one-party control is not good for our state. Contested control is better for our state, and that's where we need to be.
You talk about being able to get your agenda passed, and it's true you were able to, but with Governor Whitmer and the governor's office,
right,
you got it passed, but it didn't get signed into law. In the previous 8 years before she came into office, Republicans were in charge of everything, the House and the Senate and the governor's office. And they had that same unilateral ability that Democrats control now. So whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing, it certainly has been more often that the Republicans have been in that spot in the past 40 years. Democrats say that they're doing things that they were elected to do. And that's everything from the gun bills that they ran, right to work, prevailing wage, all of those things. Now, that may be so, but are all of those things, they obviously are not agenda items for Republicans. And so Republicans have been somewhat on the 54 side
Right.
in this first 3 months. Does that change as we go along? Do you find paths of cooperation? Because in a normal year, vast majority of the bills would be bipartisan. And by the way, I have predicted this a couple of times. I think it's hard to hold all 56 Democrats together during the budget process.
Right.
Because that becomes very much about my district.
Right.
You know?
Right. So, first of all, let me start by saying the Democrats are acting as though they have a mandate. The last time you and I spoke, I think it was the last time you and I spoke, I mentioned that one of the things that they're going to do is they are going to legislate far further to the left than what they were elected to do. I mean, look, they won the House by. They control the House by, I think, 700 votes out of the entire state. One seat difference would have been a 50-50 split. A total of 1,400 votes would have put it in Republican control. And so to say that they're doing what they were elected to do is a bit of a stretch. I mean, just look at the Right to Work initiative, right? They just repealed Right to Work. Well, in 2012, there was a ballot initiative essentially trying to enshrine in the Constitution the parameters that a repeal of Right to Work would have done. That failed by 20% in the state of Michigan. That failed by 30% in Representative Fitzgerald's district, who voted to repeal Right to Work. So to say that they're doing the things that they were elected to do is a little bit of a stretch. And then the other thing I would point out is this is what they've been allowed to get away with. What about the things that they've been trying to do? I mean, if you look at what they tried to do with Right to Work, over and above repealing Right to Work, what they also tried to do is that put school districts in control of collective bargaining agreements. So a superintendent could be hired or fired by a collective bargaining agreement. Fortunately, we were able to get that stopped, but that's the extent that they're trying to go. Not only that, but they're trying to make it so unions can contribute unlimited funds to campaigns. All other organizations, individuals, people, businesses, whatever, all other campaign contribution limits still intact, but the union bosses can write $1 million check to a state rep if they want to. So that's what I meant when I said they were going to take it too far, and they've definitely done that.
What does this look like going forward? Because you do have a budget to put together. It's a big one, too.
Yep.
And we know the state's got that surplus that is not quite $9 billion anymore, because some of that's already been spent. But there still is a lot of money out there, albeit one-time money. But there's a lot of money coming into the Treasury. And generally, we see budget bills have bipartisan support. And as one operative told me last week in the Capitol, look, there's enough money that we ought to be able to get everybody to go along. But is that how it's going to work, or are Republicans feeling a little bit on the sidelines after these first 90 days?
Certainly the divisiveness with which the Democrats have controlled the legislature over the last 2.5 months has built a pretty significant wedge. We'll see if that can come down now that we have a spring break coming up, and after that coming back together to do the budget. But what's interesting, like if you look at the budget that the governor proposed, it grows state spending. So regardless of the federal funding, it grows government by 40%. 40% over what it was before she took office. It's unbelievable, and if that's where we're starting, then she is going to be very hard-pressed to get any Republican vote. She certainly won't get mine.
Then that brings up another question, and I haven't really had this discussion, but this is a good enough time to have it. The budget has to be done by October 1st. I'm not at all sure the legislature will be in session on October 1st. And the reason I say that, as you well know, but I'll explain for our viewers, is that because one of the early on bills that Democrats were very insistent that they pass was moving their presidential primary up to February 27th, I think is the date.
Yep.
And in doing so, they also had to move the Republican primary. That primary date would be the same. Well, Republicans don't have the go-ahead from the National Party, and so the Republicans didn't vote for it, and they didn't give it immediate effect, which means, and we're already off in the weeds, 90 days after the adjournment of a legislative session for the year is when bills can go into effect if they don't have immediate effect. So if you stayed until December, it likely wouldn't happen until March. February 27th is the date. Ballots have to be out 45 days early. You've got to have weeks and weeks before that to get them early. So my supposition is that if they're really going to do that, they're going to have to adjourn sometime in first part of September, maybe as late as October 1st. But so what does that do to the budget process and getting everything done if you operate on the assumption that you're going to be adjourning early?
Right. So, number one, so absolutely, the governor has made it very clear that her number one priority is this presidential election. I'm not sure why. I don't know if that's indicative of anything, but that was her number one initiative early on. And so, in order for that to come to fruition legally, we would have to be out of session by November 27th. But to what you alluded to, that doesn't allow for enough time to have a proper election cycle. So I do think that the governor will give up a substantial number of session days in order to get that priority done of hers. So now, by law, we actually have to have the budget done earlier, right? Like,
That's right.
During the Snyder administration, it was passed. I think it's either June 1st or July 1st. I don't remember which
Yeah.
date. Either way, it's going to be interesting. I don't know. Certainly, it's going to be 54 no's with how the governor proposed her budget. If that's the budget that gets proposed, I don't see a single Republican supporting it. I just don't. Now, will they be able to get all 56 Democrats on board with that? Well, the governor has been controlling the legislature for the last 3.5 months, or 2.5 months, however long it's been, and so maybe we'll see.
Well, one of the things about that new deadline, and you're right, that was moved forward. And I think it's only been met once since that law was
Right.
put into place. So I still think of the constitutional
Right.
deadline of
Right.
the end of September. But no matter, it's a lot of work to be done between now and then. Let me switch gears in the final moments that we have and ask you about this. Tough enough to get Republican agenda items passed when you had the majority.
Yep.
Tougher still in the minority.
Yep.
And there are still things, no doubt, that you want to do for your district. How do you continue to be an effective representative now that you're on the other side?
Right. That's a great question. So, you know, our number one priority, and one of my number one priorities was to deliver tax relief to the taxpayers here in Michigan. And so we were able to do that in the minority by fighting the governor. So the income tax in Michigan is 4.25% now. By the end of the month, unless the governor throws some more tricks at it, that will now be cut down to 4.05%. The governor and the Democrats in the legislature tried every trick in the book in order to avoid that. They tried bribing the taxpayers with $180 one-time checks in order to avoid that. They tried giving hundreds of millions of dollars away in SOAR funding and corporate credits and subsidies. We were able to fight all that enough in order to make it so that tax cut is going to be delivered to the taxpayers of Michigan. And hopefully we can do more. We'll see. It's harder in the minority.
And final question, I only got about 15 seconds. Do we return after spring break to a more regular order, or is the same frenetic pace going to continue?
You know, I don't hold much hope for that. Like I said, the lack of decorum and lack of respect for the institution has been very prevalent. The lack of keeping to rules has been very prevalent in the Democrat-held legislature. I don't know if that's going to be resolved or not.
When the legislature returns on April 11th, there will be plenty to do. The big question is, will they continue with quick action on important issues passed in many cases on a party line vote? Or will things slow down a bit as the complicated business of putting together a budget requires more discussion and, dare I say, even cooperation? We'll see when they return. I'll be back next with more To the Point. When the legislature comes back from spring break, the budget will be a top priority. It perhaps will be made more urgent by the supposition that the House and Senate could adjourn earlier than they otherwise would in order for other legislation to go into effect. One more thing we'll be watching every week, To the Point.